Hello. Welcome to Colonels of Truth, brought to you by Progress Kentucky. Thank you so much for joining us. We know there's a lot of internet out there, and you have somehow landed on us. That's so exciting. We got a great show, a lot of important Kentucky political news we're going to bring you. We've got some Mitch versus Rand, political shenanigans. Always love to highlight those stories. Also, we've got a new Senate candidate entering the race for the Democratic nomination to replace Mitch. That's interesting because who knew that four was not enough? Now there are five. So we'll talk a little bit about this individual. And then because, hey, it's a new week, there's a new SNAP update. So yeah, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program continues to be something that's worth talking about because a lot of people rely on it, and it's got a lot of problems, curveballs, changes. So those are the stories we're going to cover. And then really, really exciting, we have got an interview with Professor Josh Douglas. He is an election law expert, and he's at UK Law School. We're going to talk a little bit about some news that I had seen and was maybe alarmed about. He talks me down, which is pretty awesome. So there's some kind of generally positive vibes about what's happening in voting, although we do talk about the gerrymandering fight that's happening all across the country, and a few other important issues. So be sure to hang out and wait for that interview, because he has been on the show a few times, and every time he comes on, I always just learn a ton. Right? He's just really a fountain of information for sure about voting rights, which we know are critically important in the next year or so, right? But speaking of the next year or so, are you ready, ready to help take Trump's power? As we know, things aren't awesome right now in Washington, D.C. The shutdown is over. We could talk about that if we want to, but a lot of other people have talked about it, so we're going to just let you find the takes you prefer out there on the interwebs. But we know that the best way is probably not to shut down the government if you want to take Trump's power. Probably not the best outcome. The best option really would be to take one of the halls of Congress, right? Ideally both, but we're setting our sights on the House, and we got this crazy, amazing, awesome thing, which is a competitive district here in the 6th District. It is open for the first time in over 2 decades. And so what we're going to be doing over the next year is going to really be focused on flipping that 6th district and some key state house races that are within that 16 county congressional district. So really wanted to just give you a quick update. We had our Flip the 6th campaign launch this Sunday. It was phenomenal. Really, truly amazing. Thanks to West 6 for hosting us at their really cool barrel room. We had Silas House speaking, former poet laureate for Kentucky, amazing writer and activist. We had Representative Adam Moore. We had Peaceful Bluegrass Resistance, Craig Blair, Celis Wilder, our own Annable Nagel. Truly awesome. We sold a ton of t-shirts, which was cool, designed by our own Parker. Signed up a bunch of new supporters. Thanks to everyone who, committed their time or their treasure to our campaign. Amazing pizza from Dingbats. Chris, I know you love Dingbats. If you've not tried their Roman-style pizza, get over there to Jefferson Street and try some. But the work really begins now. So we had a big party. We launched the campaign. Now we have to get to work. So the first Monday of the month, we're going to be back at the West 6 Barrel Room on Monday, December 1st, 6 to 8 p.m. We have got a Mobilize link, which I think we can drop in the chat for you to check, to click on and join the event. I think that should happen. If the producer is paying attention, we can get that in the comments for you. And then, really important work to do between now and next December. So yeah, or next November, I suppose. And then really thrilled to have that type of energy going into the campaign. Got a lot of great positive feedback. We had some really awesome people that just came out to support it. We had a few different state house representatives, Ann Donworth, Adriel Camuel, showed up and gave their support, which was awesome. We had a bunch of the candidates who are running for the 6th district show up. So Zach Dembo was there, Aaron Petrie was there, David Kloiber was there. So a lot of folks who are really interested and committed to really pitch it in to make things better, which is pretty awesome. So if you got a conflict on Monday, that first Monday isn't great, or it's too far for you to go, you can also just make a donation. You can donate your time and energy in other ways, but we'd love to see you on Monday, December 1st, 6 to 8 p.m. At the West 6 Barrel Room. So let's now check in with our co-hosts. Let us know who you are, where you are, and who is on your biting list. So yeah. Hey, Chris Priest, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Woo!
Hello.
Hello. There
Hey,
you are.
you woke me up. I heard pizza. And,
I mean, like Dingbats, that is like legit good pizza, right?
yeah, it's absolutely my favorite pizza in Lexington now. I was very saddened by the closure of Mellow Mushroom because it was my number one, and then I went many months with driving to, is it Corbin or London? One of those two places where there's another Mellow Mushroom where I would go and get pizza. But now there's Dingbats in Lexington, and that is my number one.
Nice. Awesome. All right. So yeah, who's on your biting list this week?
So I live here in Berea, Kentucky, and the mayor currently is on my biting list. The last city council meeting, he threw a constituent out who had 3 minutes to talk, citing an order that she was not talking about the city business. And what she was doing, she was talking about city business. She was asking them about helping people who were suffering from lack of SNAP funds and providing context. And as soon as the mayor heard her say the words President Trump, he kept telling her to stop. And she wasn't stopping. She was keeping going. And then eventually he was like, get her out of here. And had the chief of police carry her out.
Wow.
Drag her out, really. And it was a scene, and it was very disheartening. I thought our mayor had more sense than that.
Who's the mayor? Name the name. What's the name we got to put on the biting list? Who is this character?
Bruce Fraley. Bruce Fraley.
Yeah, what a jerk.
Yeah.
They're intolerant Berea. That's not really what I would expect to hear from Berea.
Yeah, I did not expect that from Bruce. Typically, I associate him with someone who is more tempered in his in the things that he does. But that was something that just shocked me and quite appalled that happened.
Yeah.
But we'll be talking more about SNAP a little bit later.
Oh, yeah, for sure. All right. So I'm going to say on my biting list this week, and it's kind of like biting someone when they're down, but I'm all right with that with this individual. So, yeah, Kim Davis is on my biting list because the Supreme Court, refused to hear her case, rejected her case, and, really was, I think, hopefully the nail in the coffin. Right. So hopefully this is like, we just never have to hear her name again, which I think would be awesome. And I think, did I get that right? Did they refuse? They just rejected her case.
Yeah, they rejected the merits of the case, and hopefully she's on the hook for all those legal fees now.
Yes. I love that story for sure. So the fact that they, they denied the request to revisit it. And they basically said you have to pay the damages verdict, which, hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is it's emotional fees plus attorney's fees, right? So $260,000 for attorney's fees plus $100,000 in damages. So $360,000 that Kim Davis is on the hook for, which I'm sorry, that's mean. But hey, it's called the biting list segment, so it's not a nice segment. But yeah, I think this is again, and may we never have to utter her name again, because we've got a really nice Kim Davis in the Lexington activist community. She's one of the founders of Bluegrass Activist Alliance. She does amazing work. She was out at our event on Sunday launching the Flip the Six campaign, and I always just feel sorry for her that she has to share her name with such a troll.
I know. Yeah. Love you, Kim, and hopefully you don't have to deal with that other Kim anymore.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because Kim actually even watches the show, so she's hearing this, right? So sorry if there was any, I'm sorry if for a minute you thought I was talking about you. You would never be on my biting list, knock on wood. But all right, so let's get into the news of the week, which is really exciting because then I get to see that graphic where the news of the week just moves across the screen there. I'm amazed by the simple things. All right, so this is the first story. This is one where I was a little surprised to see it. I wasn't necessarily expecting to see another candidate jump in the race to the race for that empty chair, which is Mitch McConnell retiring, leaving that seat. And now there's a fifth Democrat running it. It is a Kentucky Derby trainer. His name is Dale Romans. He is a longtime racehorse trainer. I think he's won some pretty significant races in his day. And he has joined the fray, saying that he is not beholden to the Democratic Party or to Republican President Donald Trump, is running as an independent Democrat. And in his press release, he said he's going to stand up for working people across the state, fix the challenges facing our country, like harmful tariffs and dangerous healthcare cuts, instead of waging exhausting partisan fights that get us nowhere and only divide the nation. And his campaign video focuses on horse training and how much he loves his family. So, that might well work in Kentucky.
That's interesting. I don't know how you get by with the slogan "Independent Democrat." Like, just run as an independent.
I mean, I think, in terms of growth of specific voting blocks, independents are growing more than Democrats in the state. So, but, then there's not really a primary, right? So I guess if you were an independent, you would just go right to the general. Is that right?
Yep.
Which maybe is not a bad strategy, honestly. Maybe Romans needs to rethink what he's doing, because if he really wants to not be a part of the Democratic Party, I think he's kind of modeling himself after the West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. I think that was mentioned. And that's somebody who ultimately left the Democratic Party, really.
I'm tired of corporate centrist Democrats, personally.
Yeah.
No.
But he wouldn't be a puppet for President Donald Trump like the Republican freshman senator would have to be, right? So that's not wrong. So,
At least there's that.
I don't dispute that analysis, at least. But yeah, it's a lot of folks, right? So I saw Colonel Pam Stevenson. I saw her last night at a event launching one of our House Lexington area House representatives. She was launching her reelection campaign, and so Pam was there to support her, which was really nice to see. Colonel Pam, I didn't talk about this news. I think actually that news hadn't broken, but there's already Colonel Pam. There's also, of course, we've talked about Amy McGrath getting into the race. We've talked previously about the former Secret Service agent Logan Forsyth, the former CIA officer Joel Willett, and so now the horse trainer. So that's a lot. That's five. Dale Romans, welcome to the race.
Yeah. All we need now is a bourbon maker, and we'll have all scopes of Kentucky and a coal miner.
Got to get a coal miner in there. So Dale Romans, the only person without that national security bio piece. So that's interesting. Makes him stand out, but he's got the horses. I don't know. We'll see what happens. It makes it more interesting. We'll see if he's able to. I mean, he got a lot of attention on his launch. He got a nice video for his launch. So I guess there might be some money behind him. Who knows where that money's coming from? But I mean, obviously the horse race industry has got a little bit of money, so I probably could find some to start things off with. We will watch this race. As I said to Colonel Pam last night, we'd like to do similar to what we just did with the 6th district, right, where we have the candidates kind of like back to back to back for subsequent episodes. I was thinking it's going to be a lot with 4, now 5. It's like over a month of interviews, but oh well, I guess we'll just do the work. I know people want to hear from these folks, so
maybe we can just do a one shot, like all of them at once.
We could, no, that's not a bad idea. I think to do just the kind of, I like the idea of bringing the 6th district candidates back as like an actual like forum, like a candidate forum for sure. Yeah. Maybe we can just skip the individual interviews for the Senate race and just do a forum kind of style. But I don't know.
That was nice.
Yeah, that was. All right, so that's my first story. I think you've got one for us.
Yeah, so let's talk about Snap. So the government's coming back in session, so that's, that there'll be some funds for SNAP. But Kentucky officials said Wednesday nearly 600,000 residents who rely on Federal Supplement Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, to buy groceries should be partial benefits restored this week. Okay. Steele did not say how much those monthly payments were cut or decreased, so that's a little concerning there. We don't know how much they're going to lose. Some states, including Washington, Oregon, New York, New Jersey, and Hawaii, had already issued full SNAP benefits for November before the Supreme Court decision Friday, which put a halt to that. Kentucky did not do that, but Andy did set aside or ordered $5 million to go to food banks to help people with this needs for food. So many people in Kentucky will lose SNAP benefits due to changes enacted as part of the Big Beautiful Bill. So even once SNAP does come back, there are going to be people who are going to lose them. People between the ages 18 and 64 must show that they are working, volunteering, or in school to receive benefits as of November 1st. Excuse me. Sorry. Previously, there was a waiver, and 117 out of the 120 counties in Kentucky had a waiver that they could apply for to negate those work requirements. And a lot of that was based on unemployment benefits, but the Big Beautiful Bill got rid of that. So these people are going to have to deal with that, reporting those. So SNAP reaches 595,200 Kentucky residents, which translates to 13% of the state's population. As many as 1 in 8 Kentuckians use SNAP. So this is a lot of people that are impacted by this. Looks like the government's going to reopen, so so some of those funds are going to be coming back, but the work requirement or volunteering or being in school is going to be going away soon, or not going away. You're going to have to. It's going to be enforced soon for even the places that did have waivers. So it's kind of scary.
Yeah, that's like, and then those work requirements are basically, it's kind of a reporting requirement that a lot of people just won't do, right? So because they don't have the right kind of documentation for their hours, and it's a big pain in the ass, and more hoops for people to jump through, and a lot of times people will be just kind of booted off, not because they aren't even working enough, but because just the requirements are onerous enough that they're not able to get them all filled out, right? So that's, I think, Kentucky Center for Economic Policy estimates 114,000 people will lose the benefits because of those requirements. That's just wrong, and just but that's the intent, right? That's why they made these changes in the big ugly bill. So unfortunate, and I think because SNAP's been in the news recently, this is the time to tell people these changes are coming, right? People are beginning to really grasp how important SNAP is to so many of our neighbors. And then to know that this is being, the rug's going to be pulled out from underneath a whole bunch more after we've kind of just really seen the community come together to help feed folks. It's just shameful, really. All right. So my third story, our story number 3, is about Mitch versus Rand. We always love a nice, Republican inter-party fight. Rand and his friend Massey love to take on their own party. But this is coming to us from Forward Kentucky, and it is commentary about the bait and switch on hemp. So Kentucky hemp farmers, including Jay Grundy, I don't know Jay Grundy, but apparently he is well known. They face potential bankruptcy due to proposed changes in the 2018 Farm Bill, including reducing Delta 9 THC limits. So these regulatory shifts really could devastate the hemp industry, harm farmers and limit access to essential hemp-based products. And so that's certainly something that is problematic. And this change apparently was like slipped into legislation. It certainly wasn't a standalone bill, but this was basically a proposed repeal of the 2018 Farm Bill, which of course this was something that Mitch got a lot of credit for, was the legalization of hemp farming. But now this Appropriations Committee has endorsed a change that would reduce the amount of legally allowed Delta-9 THC from 0.3% to 0%, which means that, thousands of hemp growers across the nation would not have a market for their crops. And according to the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, the vast majority, 97% of hemp production in Kentucky, is for extracts like CBD and other cannabinoids. Even the most non-intoxicating hemp products contain that kind of trace amounts of THC, so that change would virtually wipe out the entire regulated hemp consumable market, leading to widespread farm closures and job losses. Of course, farmers not doing well right now because of the tariffs and because of soybean markets and all sorts of things that Trump's already done to rural communities. But it would also federally criminalize hemp products like full spectrum CBD oil, would strip access from millions of Americans, including veterans, first responders, and others who rely on those CBD oils for relief of chronic pain. Hundreds of other Kentucky farmers moved into hemp after 2018 because they thought it was going to be a legal crop and that they could move into it. And now, of course, these are huge amounts of investments that have gone into these markets, have gone into these farms. And this is, again, another massive rug pull from Congress if they move forward with these changes. So really, really important that, that Congress take a beat here. And Mitch, I think, is actually the person who is proposing these changes or behind these changes. Kentucky's agriculture commissioner, though, is lining up with Rand. So Jonathan Schell strongly opposes the recriminalization of hemp products, saying that the farmers deserve stability and support as they work to grow and diversify their operations. They've seen strong progress in hemp production, including significantly increased acreage from year to year, which is an encouraging sign of the industry's resilience and potential. So, yeah, really bad idea. Not shocked that Mitch is pulling the rug out from underneath these folks as he's retiring. I guess they weren't paying enough for lobbyists to get access to Mitch, but Rand's been standing up against it, which it'll be interesting to see how that does play out. So watch this space for resolution on that issue, I suppose. What do you think about hemp and the THC limits, Chris?
I mean, the crop. I think it's ridiculous to outlaw Mother Nature in general, and to we've encouraged farmers to take up hemp. And I remember talking to a farmer a couple years ago. I think this may have been while I was running, and he was talking like they'll have a regular they'll have somebody come out and inspect their farm. They'll check the THC limits, and if they find that it's over, they'll just burn it right there, just burn it all, and they get they get nothing from it. Now, sometimes I think there was a little bit of a safety net at one point that if that had happened, that they would get some kickback, but I'm not sure if that's still around or not. But that's very scary for those farmers. They're doing it to make money, and then here they're trying to regulate them out, and it's just a crop. Like, I just find it absurd.
Yeah. Oh, and so I'm sorry, I kind of lost a little bit of the details of this story. So actually, the continuing resolution that the Senate passed Monday night to end the federal government shutdown included this language in it. So this is like a big deal. So it's now passed the Senate. Now it looks at what will the House do in terms of language, right? Because what the Senate passed is not the same as what the House passed. So the House does, has to reconvene, has to pass their own continuing resolution to fund the government. And it'll be interesting to see if this issue picks up. My hunch is we watch to see Thomas Massey kind of picking that fight over there. But yeah, it'll be a continuing story, as I said. Still right, watch the space, but I didn't realize the continuing resolution in the Senate did include it because Mitch voted for it and slipped it in there. Crazy.
That is.
All right, so now that's it. Those news of the week. That's the news we thought we would share with you. Now, really thrilled to have this interview with Josh Douglas. So let me go ahead and cue that up. I talked to him yesterday, so this is not going to be live, but it's. There we go. But yeah, that's what we're going to be doing, is listening to Josh Douglas here in a second. Thrilled to be joined this week by Professor Josh Douglas, who is the Associate Dean for Research at UK Law School. He's back on the show. He is an expert in election law, and obviously that's something we're thinking a lot about right now. We just had very important off-year elections that brought about some pretty significant, impressive political results in places like Pennsylvania, places like Mississippi, Georgia, New Jersey, and Virginia were, I think, the biggest kind of stories that a lot of people were paying attention to. But I think for this audience and for this guest, really interested in the idea about what happened in California. Because that was kind of one issue on the ballot, Amendment 50, which is about redistricting. So that's a story that I want to talk a bit about in a second. But one thing that struck me, Professor Douglas, about that election was the news that the Department of Justice would be sending, in their Civil Rights Division, election monitors in to take a look at elections, specifically with an eye towards California. And I think New Jersey as well was another location that were named, pretty blue states. But would have some pretty important outcomes that this DOJ might be interested in. Of course, this DOJ being one that has been, I would argue, wholly kind of absorbed into the Trump apparatus, as we've seen, just all norms being thrown aside, as we've seen him, using the DOJ to go after his political enemies, kind of puts a taint on anything the DOJ is doing in terms of that direct engagement. So wanted to just get your take on this and see if am I like a little freaking out here? Are we being a little overly sensitive? What do you think is happening with these election monitors, and how did you see things happening with this most recent election?
So the DOJ, and thanks for having me. Of course, it's always good to chat with you. The DOJ has long monitored elections. So the very fact of the DOJ sending monitors into certain jurisdictions is not a concern at all. In fact, it's often done this in history to check for compliance with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Of course, federal monitors were required in the South soon after the Voting Rights Act to ensure that the southern states that were discriminating stopped their discriminatory tactics. So, the fact of the DOJ sending monitors is actually fairly routine. Of course, the concern is the hubbub about it in the Trump DOJ. And but what we saw in the elections last Tuesday was that basically the monitors didn't do much. Very few actually were sent. I think most places had 0 or maybe 1 when they were announced that they're the places where they were going to send monitors, and they didn't see anything. There's sort of nothing concerning about having the monitors there. So here's where my concern is. I am afraid of seeing another announcement as we lead up to the 2026 midterms that the DOJ is going to send monitors, and that scares people because it's not scary. It shouldn't be seen as scary. And I don't want to see another kind of huge media uproar about this potential when it is a sort of thing that is routine when done in the correct way and consistent with law. And it shouldn't stop everyone from feeling like they can go and cast their ballot as they are legally allowed to do so. So the biggest concern to me is the deterrence effect that the announcement could have on voters. It didn't seem like we had that happen this year, and I'm very hopeful that voters understand they have rights to go cast a ballot regardless of whether federal monitors are at the polls or not.
Yep. So the federal monitor, total standard practice. I think looking back in the most recent elections in 2024, they went to maybe 22 states. In 2020, they went to 18 states. So this is a normal practice to make sure that voting is going smoothly and that these local precincts or whoever is like handling it correctly. Right. So I think it's easy to be a little alarmed when you hear those stories because maybe you aren't aware that this is how things happen, and that this is the kind of history of the DOJ. And as I said earlier, it's hard to really trust Pam Bondi to just do the job, because we've seen a lot of really problematic implementation of the Department of Justice and how they are utilizing the law to go after Trump's enemies, very clearly kind of bending some rules there, or just looking to find, that outcome ahead of precedent and ahead of good law, right? So, easy for people to be a little bit alarmed. And I want to just bring you on to hear a little bit from when should we be alarmed? Is there any, the fact they're having election monitors, not a big deal, but, I think what a lot of people have said, and they kind of like in the air, right, is a lot of concern about Donald Trump, and who is throwing all precedent out the window, and might be doing something a lot more untoward in terms of influencing elections. Obviously an election monitor that you don't even know is there isn't going to influence the election. If you've got, armed, ICE agents, that might be different, right? And I think there's a lot of people who are really concerned about this administration's, willingness to mobilize these different agencies and entities in ways that they've never been done before, right? So that's not what happened here. What's your take on the kind of, I don't know, is that a rational fear? Is that something? What should we be looking for in terms of more troubling behavior from this administration?
Well, I mean, I would want to caution people to not read too much into any one thing and to check their own prior assumptions. So, you might have a prior assumption regarding what you think the Trump administration has done or will do, and you need to be careful about, you hear a story about federal monitors not letting your own bias play into the interpretation of that. But if we saw something that was actually unprecedented for the way elections are run. So if we saw, him send armed military troops into certain cities to go to the polls and monitor elections. Well, that would be, unprecedented and concerning. And I'm not suggesting that's anything that has been suggested or that he would do, but in terms of the kind of hypothetical situations. But I actually think, and I think this is going to get to some of your other questions, perhaps, I think we're not concerned enough about some of the things going on already with respect to the 2026 election and the mid-decade redistricting that you mentioned, the California Proposition 50, about that. When people ask me am I concerned about the 2026 election, or, the nonsense about whether Trump's going to run for a third term, he can't. I mean, that's not, I sort of afraid to even mention that, just because
it's plain language. It's right there in the Constitution.
Clear, and there's, he likes to troll the left by making these sorts of things. It's exactly what he's doing there.
Professor Douglas, he has had hats printed up, so I see how, yes, he likes to troll the left, but he gives them plenty of chum, really,
But that's not a thing, and that's not the thing I'm concerned about. I'm not concerned about him canceling the 2026 midterms. It's not really a thing. The states run elections under the Constitution. The House of Representatives terms end in each session, right? So if you don't have elections, you don't have a house, and so I'm not concerned about that stuff. But I am concerned about whether the will of the people will be accurately expressed in the results, because of the ways in which states are redrawing the lines in this mid-decade redistricting. And it's a political war that really seemingly has no end game, or no way to put down the arms, I guess, if you want to talk about the war analogy. But to me, it's very concerning with respect to will we actually get results that accurately reflect what the people want, in the way we did last week, and then the way we did in 2024.
It seems right. So it seems very telling. So in Texas, they started this because the governor was willing to do what Trump asked him or told him to do. And so that set it all in motion, right? I think in Prop 50, it was very clear, like, we're only doing this because Texas is doing this. And if Texas backs off, we'll back off. And by the time, voters were voting, like, well, the die had been cast in Texas. But very telling, the number of legislators who are losing their seats in Texas, right? Because I was under the impression that while partisan gerrymandering was okay, racial gerrymandering was still not allowed. And if you look at who's losing their seat in Texas, it's a bunch of black representatives. So it seems very clearly they are pulling away the voice of a certain set of voters. And I do think that that's really troubling. I think that, I don't know what'll happen in California exactly in terms of who's losing their seat. I haven't looked at it that closely. I know there's still question marks about Indiana, but it seems very likely that would be a black legislator that would lose their seat. If that proceeds, it's a bit of a question mark right now. Thankfully, we've seen, Utah, their efforts have kind of, I think, been muddied and stopped right now by a court. Kansas seems like maybe they don't have the political will to get it done in a way the governor or the Democratic governor couldn't veto. So yeah, it's an interesting mixed bag, but we know Texas is doing it. We know that, California is doing it, and then we'll just kind of see where it goes from there.
And Missouri and North Carolina also add to the
Yep.
list. Those places are also doing it in a way that will impact black Democratic lawmakers.
And then I think they just recently, Virginia said they were going to do it. So, that will be, as we've seen in Virginia, they actually, flipped a bunch of seats. And so the Democrats will be in charge of that process. Ostensibly, we won't see that same kind of impact on black voters. But, it seems odd to me that they're kind of getting away with this, because that is, I thought, the Supreme Court's current interpretation of what kind of gerrymandering you can do. And removing the power of black voters and the impact of black voters seemed like a line they weren't willing to cross. But what's the current situation in the Supreme Court?
So this, of course, gets pretty complicated, and I teach an entire course on election law that dives
Distill it into 5 minutes, please.
Right, into these various issues and areas. But we need to talk about two basic doctrines that the court has had case law on, and then understand how the partisan gerrymandering aspect fits in. So the first doctrine is the idea behind the Voting Rights Act, Section 2. So Section 2 of the Act says that you can't have any voting rule that has the effect of discrimination on the basis of race. So even if you're not trying to discriminate, if the effect is that racial minorities are worse off, then that violates the law. So, think of a voter ID requirement that the voter ID law is not intending to harm any individuals based on race, but depending on the state, and we kind of know the different permutations of how voter ID laws play out and what the requirements are. In some states, we have evidence, we have data showing that minority individuals are less likely to have a compliant photo ID. And if that's the case, then a photo ID requirement, which is not intended to discriminate on the basis of race, actually has the effect of doing so. And that's the same with respect to the way that lines are drawn sometimes. Perhaps we're drawing the lines in a way that we're not trying to make it worse off for minority individuals to elect a candidate of their choice, but the way the line draws are, that's the effect. And Section 2 would strike that down. The second doctrine to talk about is what's known as the racial gerrymandering doctrine under the U.S. Constitution. And here, basically, the court has said that states cannot think about race too much when they draw the lines. So race can't be the predominant consideration. So states like Louisiana, which is the state that's subject to the lawsuit right now, pending before the U.S. Supreme Court, sort of says it's between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, it's got to think about race some to ensure it has sufficient minority representation, but it can't think about race too much, or it's going to violate that racial gerrymandering doctrine. So what do we get in terms of the partisan gerrymandering aspect? Well, in 2019, the U.S. Supreme Court said that partisan gerrymandering is perfectly constitutional, that states are allowed to draw the lines on the basis of politics. But that's kind of become supercharged now, because in these lawsuits suggesting or arguing that a map is invalid under Section 2, states are defending the map by saying we're trying to focus on partisanship. Or in a case out of South Carolina from a couple of years ago, when Black voters challenged the map, saying you thought about race too much in the way you drew the lines. You packed Black people into as few districts as possible so they'd have a supermajority in one district but no influence in the rest of the districts. So you thought about race too much, and South Carolina defended and said, well, maybe we thought about race some, but we were also thinking about politics. We were also basically engaging in a partisan gerrymander. And the U.S. Supreme Court said that's a perfectly valid defense to that claim. And here in the Louisiana case, again, when the court is faced with a situation where Louisiana, it has 6 congressional districts. It initially drew a map that had 1 district that was majority black, so one of the 6. And yet Louisiana has a population that's about 33% black. And so you'd think you'd have, closer to 2 districts that are majority opportunity districts where minority members can elect a candidate of their choice. So Louisiana drew that map. Now it's got 2 of 6, and now white plaintiffs sued and said, well, you're thinking about race too much. And one thing that Louisiana was saying was that, well, yeah, maybe we're thinking about race because we have to comply with the Voting Rights Act, but we're also thinking about politics. So partisan gerrymandering has become now a defense that wins against claims of racial gerrymandering or minority vote dilution.
And so that was recently argued in the Supreme Court. So we won't know how they how that all shakes out for a bit. It'll be interesting to see. Obviously, it could have very significant impacts and ramifications for this highly partisan, very closely divided chamber. But you were mentioning that there might be other cases that could have a very significant impact on our ability to have free and fair elections as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the court just announced it's going to hear a case out of Mississippi on mail-in balloting and the deadline that ballots can arrive after Election Day. So in some states, your absentee ballot or your mail-in ballot, as long as it's postmarked by Election Day, if it arrives a few days after, you still count that ballot. Now, other states say everything's got to arrive by Election Day, but states like Mississippi, and I think there's about 28 or 29 states that allow ballots postmarked by Election Day to arrive a few days after, and they're still counted. I think in Mississippi, it can arrive 5 days after. Well, some plaintiffs challenged this Mississippi law, I think spurred on in some ways by Trump's attack on mail-in voting. I'm not saying that these particular plaintiffs were tied to Trump, but it has been one of his conversation talking points about elections is that we should get rid of mail-in voting, he said, except for, maybe military voters. So this is the challenge to try to make mail-in voting, less, make it harder for voters, I guess, or at least make voters have to ensure their ballots arrive before Election Day. And the argument is that the Mississippi law violates federal law. So a longstanding federal law from the mid-1800s says that there shall be one uniform election day for electing members to Congress, and we set it on at the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. And the argument is that allowing ballots to arrive after Election Day violates the idea that there's one uniform Election Day. And so the plaintiffs are arguing that all ballots have to be completed by Election Day to comply with that federal law. Now, this is a pretty bold argument because it would upend over a century and a half of practice in how states have run elections. States for years have allowed ballots to arrive after Election Day, so long as they're postmarked beforehand. It would also call into question early voting, because if the idea is that you can only have ballots on one day on Election Day, well, why would that allow early voting? I mean, I think the court could decide this case without touching or discussing early voting, but the theory behind it could be very concerning for early voting. And it's always been understood that federal law requiring a uniform Election Day means the election ends by a certain day, and ending means the ballots have arrived. But the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the plaintiffs and struck down the Mississippi law and said that Mississippi cannot allow ballots to arrive after Election Day. And so the court just agreed to hear this case. Now, so maybe enough justices saw the the Fifth Circuit ruling in the Mississippi case and said, we need to reverse that. But maybe there are enough justices to kind of curtail states' ability to engage in mail-in balloting. My suspicion is that the court will not go as far as the Fifth Circuit did in this case, but it's certainly one to watch in the ways in which the court thinks about the right to vote and states' ability to make it easier or harder for people to cast a ballot.
It does seem problematic that, whether or not your vote is going to be counted is all kind of suffer the whims of the Postal Service, which we all know can be a little uneven in how they get mail from point A to point B. And it's not always the quickest possible route. So that's definitely one to watch. Interesting. I don't know, and this is maybe something beyond your field of expertise. Like, what is the problem with mail-in voting and President Trump? You have any idea? Have you figured out why he thinks it's a real problem? Because it does seem like a lot of states, a lot of red states, do mail-in voting and like mail-in voting and like the ease and like the ability to kind of to manage the election a little bit more. I think Utah does it very effectively and works very well for Republicans for them. I don't really understand the rationale and the opposition to mail-in voting. Do you have any insights?
I think historically it was understood that Democrats tended to rely on mail-in balloting more than Republicans. The origin comes from Oregon, a more blue state. That's the first state that started doing universal vote by mail, where every voter receives a mail-in ballot that they can return. I think that when we've had voter fraud examples in this country, they have more often been involved with absentee ballots. And so people who are concerned about fraud. Now, our system of mail-in voting is very secure and we have fail-safe mechanisms in there, but it is true that mail-in balloting means that the ballot is not in the possession of the election officials or under the supervision of the election officials. There's also something that we refer to called the big red mirage and the big blue wave. Not big blue because of Kentucky, but the red mirage is on election night. Often the count demonstrates or shows Republicans ahead. And that's because there had been a phenomenon where in states that allow both in-person and mail-in voting, Republicans tended to like voting in person more and Democrats tended to like voting by mail first. And the officials would count those in-person votes first. And so it would look like the Republican is ahead on election night. But then once we count all of those mail-in ballots that have arrived, that are all valid ballots, the Democrats take over, so-called, the election, or the election seems like the results have changed. Now, as I describe to people as a huge baseball fan, this is like, telling us what the score is after the sixth inning when we know there's 9 innings to play, right? Those mail-in ballots are perfectly valid. So election night counts are not a thing. The election night results are really not a thing in terms of what the official results are. They're projections, and they're projections on what ballots have been counted already. So, calling the red mirage, or it looks like Republicans won, and then the mail-in ballots reverse that. It's just the order in which the ballots happen to be counted. But I suspect that part of Trump's distaste is, partially a Republican talking point because of the ways in which ballots have been cast. Partially, if you are concerned about voter fraud, certainly mail-in ballots are perhaps, even though very, very minimally, perhaps more susceptible to it. And then the red mirage and the blue wave that you see on the election counts.
Yeah, but that's just a matter of when they actually count and add in those mail-in ballots, right? Because some states can count them early and then just dump them in at the beginning of the night, whereas other states, have to count them the day of, so it takes a lot longer to process, and then they show up at the end, right?
And these ballots are harder to process because you have to verify the signature matches, you have to verify the voter's registration status. So, right, there's just steps to ensure that there's not fraud in the system. It takes longer to process them.
So I know you do your own show. I think it's called Democracy Optimist. So is that still the title? You still feeling good, optimistic about where things are?
People ask me this all the time. Optimism is not, I think things are great. Optimism is, I have hope for the future if we do the right thing. So an optimist, to me, is not someone who is, or a democracy optimist is not a descriptor of, I think everything's great. It's a statement of purpose for what I think the system can be if we do the hard work we need to.
Excellent. And then, so I know that as a fellow Kentuckian, we've had, I think, widely acknowledged to be a pretty good leadership at the Secretary of State's office here, even though I am, fiercely progressive. I've seen what seems to be a pretty rational actor there. What did you think of the Secretary of State, Michael Adams' statement about people calling his office about why the elections were closed why the polls were closed last week for elections in Kentucky?
I think people were taking it out of context. I don't think anyone was actually calling him and saying from Kentucky saying, I want to vote in New York City's mayoral election. I'm sure people heard news about elections going on and thought, hey, why don't we have elections now? And so I think that's probably what I haven't talked to him about it yet, but I'm guessing that's what he was saying. But he has a good way with words and with sending a message by getting it, and his message is valid. We need better civics education. I'd be surprised if there's many Kentuckians who actually thought they could vote in the New York City mayoral election. But I'm not surprised that people were curious why we didn't have any elections when other states were having them. And it's just the sort of weird nature of the election calendar in Kentucky.
Yeah, I think he fairly artfully wrote his comment onto the social media that would get the most traction and attention. So yes, I concur that it's highly unlikely that people are calling this because they wanted to vote for Mamdani. But yeah, so thanks so much. Anything we've not touched on that you would flag as area for folks who are just really interested in our democracy to kind of keep an eye on voting and what's happening right now, either in our state or across the country?
Well, one thing I'm working on right now is a new book about non-voters and why people don't vote and voter turnout. And you see this every time, even this past election in New York City and Virginia and New Jersey, you saw media stories about how turnout was really high. It was record breaking. And I mean, yeah, it was high if you compare it to the previous odd-yeared election, but yet still over half the people didn't show up. And so I think we need to reframe our narrative when we talk about voter turnout to really question why we're okay with so many people not showing up to the polls and accepting that as strong and accepting that as good turnout. So that's kind of one of my big focus over the next several years as I think about gearing up for the 2028 election, non-voters, voter turnout, and then the civics education, civic engagement part as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of cynicism, right? I think there's a lot of fatalism about our political process, and that it isn't going to do much to change people's lived experience. And so why would you put yourself, into that process but I'd be very interested in what you find out, really interested, because I concur. It's troubling when the actual, the person that got the most votes is the guy who didn't get any votes because, people just didn't show up. The non-voters were actually the most significant block. And if, so I think it was Ralph Nader used to have a campaign on a binding none of the above. Like if voters came out and said none of the above, then that actually was going to force another election or another process if folks were so dissatisfied with those who were the options that were put in front of them. But yeah, I do appreciate your optimism about our ability to work this democracy and make it keep working. As I was saying, it's a 9-year experiment we've got going on right now. We're getting very close to hitting that 250. Hope we do. Checking in with you sounds like nothing too alarming just right now, but good things to watch for. Obviously, these Supreme Court decisions could be significant. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your information and your views with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome, always a pleasure. All right, so that was the interview with Josh Douglas. Really, always thrilled to have him as one of our go-to experts. He's so generous with his time to share what's happening in the world of voting law. So important stuff for us as we're thinking about the kind of the potential threats to our democracy. It's good to have the facts. It's good to have the expertise. So again, thanks so much for Professor Josh Douglas for joining us. All right, let's do a call to action. We know we just talked a lot about SNAP. We have got to be there for folks who need food. As we've heard throughout the episode, hundreds of thousands of our neighbors across the Commonwealth, tens of thousands across the Bluegrass, rely upon SNAP benefits that are going to be much harder to get due to the Trump mega regime and folks like Bootlicker and the Bar. So if you, like me, want to help people, there's some great resources that have been put together. The No Kings Lexington Coalition pulled together a food hub resource guide, which includes folks like Food Chain, who we've had on the show recently, who we donated to at our launch event last week. But it also includes other important groups like Glean and God's Pantry. So if you want to be helpful in this really important issue, do hit up that bit.ly link right here. It's in the chat and on the screen. Go ahead and figure out ways you can help people in your community. So that's what's going on with us right now, is really focused on making sure people have enough to eat. So that's pretty much the show. Thank you so much for joining us. We always appreciate folks who spend their time with us in this worldwide web. And if you like the show, please go ahead and give us a review or some, stars. We haven't had a review for over a year. So, if you're just recently checking out the show, please do go to your podcast platform and leave us a review. So we're a nonprofit organization registered with Kentucky Secretary of State, organized as a 501c4. We are affiliated with the Indivisible Project and the Common Ground Kentucky Action, and are also proud members of the Forward Kentucky Network. Progress Kentucky's goal is to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. Please join us next week. A production of episode 236 was by Annable Nagel. Nate Orshan wrote and performed our theme song. You can find more information and music at natosongs.com. Check it out. If you missed our weekly live stream on Facebook or YouTube, audio podcasts and our show notes are available on Apple, Spotify. Of course, we're not using Spotify anymore, so really wherever you get your podcasts. If you do listen to the pod, again, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you are listening right now. And so I think that's the show. That's the week. Have yourself a fantastic rest of your week, and we'll see you next.